Well, it's great to have you with us here on Morning Live. Now, with national elections due to be held next year, it is of concern that 1.3 million people's addresses are still outstanding on the voters' roll. The Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa, or the IEC, has asked the Constitutional Court for an extension from the 30th of June 2018 date to the 29th of November 2019 to comply with the court order to complete the voters' roll. Now, if the Constitutional Court does not grant the IEC an extension, it means that these 1.3 million people will be struck from the voters' roll. And joining us now for greater clarity on this is Mamabolo, the CEO of the Electoral Commission of South Africa. Thank you so much for coming through, Mr. Mamabolo.
Thank you very much.
The first question, now that you've asked for the extension, is, of course, when did you become aware of the fact that you would not be able to meet the deadline?
You'll realize that in March, on the 10th and 11th, we had a national registration weekend, which was quite successful. 2.7 million people visited voting stations. But it was not enough to completely eradicate the problem of persons for whom we don't have addresses on the voters' roll. Soon thereafter, that's when we came to the realization that it might be imperative that we approach the court for the extension you referenced.
It's interesting that you've asked for a 17-month extension, which is quite an odd number. It's an odd number, but it's very precise at the same time. Why 17 months?
We believe that the work that needs to happen justifies the 17 months. In other words, it's informed about the programs that must be undertaken between the end of June and the end of that 17th month.
So what does that mean? Does this mean that previously you had underestimated just how complex or difficult it would be to actually establish the addresses of people who did not have them to begin with?
The program to seek addresses of voters, it's a novel program. There is no institution that has done this before. So there is no previous experience on which we could build our programs. So it's a very complex and vexed matter. It's influenced by factors such as circulatory migration, the number of informal settlements, the fact that there's a substantial proportion of households in the Republic which are not addressed at all.
So do you have sufficient capacity to actually deal with this issue? Because I'm reminded of the Mtuba election, and the outcome of that had to be delayed because at some point we heard that your officials were actually accompanying people to try and establish their addresses. So do you have sufficient capacity to actually get this job done timeously?
Well, we are building that capacity. It is not work that was ordinarily within the expertise of the Commission. So we have had over the past 24 months built some capacity to be able to do that. But there are factors that make this a very complex situation, such as continuous redemarcation of wards, which then split voting districts and render people incorrectly registered.
And just very quickly, I've heard that from various quarters that you may be preparing for early elections next year. Is there any truth to that?
No, there is no such preparation at the moment. However, should the National Assembly take a decision to dissolve itself earlier, the Commission should be in a position to hold those elections within 90 days. That's a constitutional and legal imperative. We have no choice in the matter.
So you are prepared for early elections next year?
If the National Assembly lawfully takes a decision to dissolve itself early, the Electoral Commission will be in a position within 90 days to conduct such an election. It is a constitutional imperative.
Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Mamabolo, the CEO of the Independent Electoral Commission, for talking to us about their request to the Constitutional Court for an extension to obtain approximately 1.3 million addresses of people on the voters' roll. And we know that the integrity of that voters' roll is key to the integrity of the election overall.